Sometimes it's okay to quit. I know your high school guidance counselor would flip their lid if they heard you say that, but it's true. It's good to quit smoking. It's good to quit the crappy job after some contingency planning, of course. And it's good to quit playing online if the lag is making you grind your teeth. And you didn't hear this from me, but if you're really not feeling a movie, it is okay to quit watching halfway through. Controversial, I know. It's not something I would personally ever do, but I will withhold judgment if that's what you need to stay happy, healthy, and safe. Of course, there are some movies so vile, so gross, and so overwhelming that a great deal of folks would find it hard to finish them. The August Undergrounds of the world are a good example of this. Slaughtered Vomit Dolls, Martyrs, and more all make the list too, but we've done Most Disturbing before, and no one's gonna accidentally stumble upon any of the flicks I just mentioned. So let's talk about some that are a little closer to the mainstream that people haven't been able to finish in one sitting. Funny enough, when Videodrome was getting market tested, they got some really bad feedback and a lot of people couldn't sit through it, but hey, it's a cult classic now. Hello horror heads and welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host Keegan Hughes, or am I? Max Wren. And today we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 horror movies you had to quit halfway. For more oddities, make sure to check out our top 5 weirdest horror movies of all time playlist right over here. And while you're at it, check out just even more videos. It's Halloween week, have some fun with it. Wicked. Let's get to it. Coming in at number 5, we've got The House That Jack Built. Speaking from personal experience, this movie can be a little much. The first time I watched it, my viewing companion had to shut it down around 70 minutes in. Too much brutal, cruel, and unspeakable violence against women, children, and people in general. And really, this is a very uncomfortable watch. The violence is realistic and horrifying. Like, at some point you think there's gonna be some relief, but really there isn't. But what did you expect from Lars von Trier? You know, the man who made Antichrist and Nymphomaniac? There's no easy watching here. So in The House That Jack Built, we meet Jack. He is a failed architect, but he's a really good serial killer. He's telling someone he refers to as Verge as all the crimes he's committed. He refuses to see his crimes as simply crimes. No, they're expressions of his artistry. Most folks would disagree, yeah? Well, as he runs down each despicable act, Verge offers some commentary, usually reprimanding Jack for committing such atrocities. We could talk about the use of Dante's Inferno as a metatext, or talk about the reasoning behind Jack's kills and whether they're effective, but those are discussion topics largely for those who manage to sit through the whole movie. Instead, let's talk about the stuff that makes it really hard to watch. Jack beats a woman played by Uma Thurman to death using a car jack. Jack cons his way into a woman's house, stabs her to death, and then spends a ludicrous amount of time making sure every drop of blood is cleaned up. Jack brings a woman and her 2 sons on a hunting trip, kills the 2 sons, and then makes the woman have a picnic with their corpses. Jack repeatedly calls a woman stupid, slices off her breast, and makes it into a wallet. Jack lines 5 men up in a freezer, intending to kill them all with 1 bullet. And finally, Jack builds a house out of corpses and then descends into hell. The movie never beats around the bush. You see everything that happens to these victims in full view. So it makes sense that some folks can't finish it. Coming in at number 4, we've got Blood Feast. Herschel Gordon Lewis, the creator of splatter. Of course folks had to dip early when these movies first came out. It was a brand new concept, showing off all that blood on screen, especially with the implication of cannibalism, ritualism, and general bad taste. By today's standards, this movie's a walk in the park. But if you put yourself in the shoes of the average filmgoer back in 1963, it's a little different. Dismemberment and buckets of blood were brand new cinematic concepts, and most folks wouldn't dare call it cinema. Dreck, filth, pornography. These are all the kinds of words you'd likely hear associated with the stuff. Blood Feast is a relatively simple movie. Fuad Ramses, the proprietor of a catering business, secretly hungers for human flesh and worships the goddess Ishtar. In order to satisfy her, Fuad decides to prepare a blood feast, a meal consisting of all human parts. He manages to sell a local socialite on the idea of this under the guise of a traditional Egyptian feast and sets off making the meal. He chops legs off, yanks tongues out, and drains folks of their blood. It's all pretty schlocky and lowbrow, but in a pretty fun way. At the party where the titular blood feast is scheduled to happen, Fuad arrives and attempts to decapitate the birthday girl as one final sacrifice. He's caught in the act, chased through an open field, and cornered by a garbage truck. What better way to make a getaway, right? Well, he hops in the back and is immediately crushed to death. What a stinger. Really, this movie doesn't hold up at all. It's a fun piece of filmmaking history, but everything from the performances to the special effects are subpar by today's standards. So if you watched it back in the day, you might have quit halfway through because it was so scandalous, but if you watch it now, you might shut it down halfway because it really is quite cheesy. Coming in at number 3, we've got Raw. Cannibalism always tends to be a touchy subject. Nobody's super comfortable with eating another person, and the thought of yourself being eaten is hard to relish, which is why Raw is such a difficult watch. Fascinating, sure, but it will 100% elicit some visceral reactions from anyone watching. There are so many gross out moments that seem to go on for way too long here. It's the tale of a young woman heading off to veterinary school and realizing that she has an insatiable hunger for raw meat. After eating a little piece of raw rabbit kidney during a hazing ritual, Justine becomes quite ill. She develops a rash and is stricken by some raunchy cravings. There are all sorts of moments that I would assume made people hit pause and never return. There's the bit where Justine eats raw chicken right out of the packaging and then proceeds to throw up the world's longest, nastiest bundle of hair. Later, Justine's sister Alexia attempts to give her a bikini wax and then tries to cut the wax off with scissors, which is uncomfortable in its own right, and then accidentally has her fingertip chopped off. Then when she wakes up, after passing out because her fingertip was chopped off, she catches Justine eating her finger. There's even a scene where Alexia films a ludicrously drunk Justine crawling on the floor like an animal, attempting to take bites out of a cadaver from the school morgue. I wouldn't blame anyone for having to take a breather after any of these moments, but they just keep happening. And more horrid, stomach-turning details are introduced. A fantastic movie, but very hard to digest. Coming in number 2, we've got the Human Centipede 2, full sequence. Do I really need to go into any detail about this one? I feel like the Human Centipede 1 was enough to turn people away, but apparently not. So please, enjoy. Here are some lovely images that may cause someone to unplug their television. A man masturbating using sandpaper. A woman being bit by a centipede and subsequently having her head caved in. A man's butt being sliced open and him bleeding to death. Staple guns and tape attaching butts to mouths. Wrapped in barbed wire. A baby's skull being crushed under a gas pedal. Oh me, oh my, this movie is a treasure trove of bad taste. But that seems to be exactly what Tom 6 was going for. I mean, at least it was in black and white. Of course, for one more step up the lunacy ladder, you could always go out and watch The Human Centipede 3, but that's a discussion for another day. And finally, at number 1, we've got Necromantic, an exploitation flick through and through. It's hard to imagine a movie more depraved than Necromantic. Director Jorg Budgeriet had to top the other classic cannibals like Cannibal Ferox and Cannibal Holocaust. Of course, just eating human corpses isn't enough. You've got to get romantic with them. Necromantic, if you will. The entire movie is just sleazy act after sleazy act. It opens with a woman taking a quick whiz at the side of the road and then showing the gruesome result of her and her partner's untimely car crash death. After this, we meet our main character, Rob. Rob removes bodies from public areas and cleans up after assorted accidents. Rob also loves to have a whole lot of fun with the corpses he cleans up. Yes, he is a necrophile. His girlfriend too. So we get to watch Rob and Betty play with human remains, bathe in blood, and build steel pipe phalluses. The story's pretty depressing too. Rob loses his job for reeking of death and running away with corpses, is dumped by Betty for losing his job, and then kills a prostitute in a graveyard. The final scene is something extra special too, but I won't get to that because if you made it to that point, you didn't quit halfway. This is a movie that's hard to convince anyone to watch, and even if you do, it would take a miracle to have them watch it all the way through. Well, did you get up and leave? Hopefully you managed to make it all the way through this video. So what'd you think? Have you watched any of these? Have you ever had to stop partway through a movie? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more icy ones from the top 5 newest SCP Monsters 2020 Part 4. Rasul S. Adarsh says, there is a website called This Person Does Not Exist, and I feel this website has some connection with SCP-5877. Love that site. Neural network image making at its creepy, crawly finest. James Irwin says, I liked the vampiric stapler, that was pretty funny. I agree, not everything has to be mind-blowing or bone-chilling or the peak of mature storytelling. Sometimes it's just fun to goof around with stuff. Nathaniel Rodriguez says, I'm gonna be honest, I miss the mustache. November approaches. Prepare yourself. Gamer Dino says, does Cartoon Cat count as SCP? No, it does not. That's a Trevor Henderson creation right there. And Smiley Hugar says, broadcasts a vehicular chainsaw murder on a minor radio station, a Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference. Good catch, Smiley. Glad someone's paying attention. And that's all the time we have for today. Before I stroll out onto the moors during a full moon after getting kicked out of a tavern, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more upsetting undulation. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. And it's good to keep... There are all sorts of moments that I was... Director Jorg Buttgerrit... Garriott? Director Jorg Buttgerrit? Man, I've said this name before too, so I'm gonna contradict myself because I'm gonna say it different. That's why it's top 5. Yeah, there we are, top 5. Top 5 Keegan sneezes. Let's go. Somebody should make an edit of that. I feel like I sneeze in like every 3rd video.